William Shakespeare is widely regarded as the most influential playwright in the English language. His collected works span comedies, tragedies, and histories, exploring a wide range of human experience, from ambition and betrayal to mistaken identity and pastoral mischief. Presented in the order found in the First Folio of 1623, this series offers a straightforward overview of each of Shakespeare's 36 plays. Each summary is delivered in a calm, consistent tone, moving through the comedies, the histories, and finally the tragedies. There is no need to remember character names or follow intricate details. The aim is not to excite or challenge, but to gently move through the complete works of Shakespeare at a steady pace. We begin with the comedies. The first is The Tempest, a story of storms, sorcery, and reconciliation on a distant island. The Tempest begins with a storm. A ship is caught in rough seas. The passengers, who include nobles from Naples and Milan, fear for their lives. The vessel appears to wreck, though all aboard survive. The storm was no natural event. It was created by Prospero, a sorcerer who lives on the island where the ship lands. He was once the Duke of Milan, but was overthrown by his brother, Antonio, with the support of King Alonso of Naples. Cast adrift with his young daughter Miranda, Prospero found refuge on the island, where he studied magic and gained control of two beings, the obedient spirit Ariel and the resentful creature Caliban. The island is now the stage for Prospero's plan. The shipwrecked group is scattered. Ferdinand, the son of King Alonso, is separated from the others and encounters Miranda. They fall in love almost immediately. Prospero watches from a distance. He puts Ferdinand through trials, partly to test his love and partly to maintain control. Meanwhile, Antonio and Sebastian, King Alonso's brother, plot to kill the king. Their plan fails. Caliban, angry at Prospero, teams up with two drunken castaways, Stefano and Trinculo. They plot to murder Prospero and take over the island. This plan also fails. Their efforts are clumsy and treated as comic relief. As the characters wander the island, Prospero uses illusions to guide them. Eventually, he brings everyone together. He confronts those who betrayed him, especially Antonio. Instead of revenge, Prospero chooses mercy. He forgives his enemies, reveals his identity, and announces the marriage of Miranda and Ferdinand. With justice served, Prospero resolves to abandon magic. He frees Ariel from service and prepares to return to Milan. The play ends with a brief epilogue in which Prospero speaks directly to the audience. He asks to be released from the island through their applause, completing the cycle of restoration and closure. The Tempest is often seen as a farewell to theatrical illusion. However, in this context, it is presented plainly as a sequence of events. One scene follows another. Characters arrive. They talk. Conflicts arise and are resolved. At the end, those who are lost are found. Those who are wronged are forgiven. And everything returns slowly to the way it was. The Two Gentlemen of Verona follows the actions of two young men, Valentine and Proteus. At the beginning, Valentine prepares to leave Verona and seek opportunity in Milan. Proteus remains behind, in love with Julia, who returns his affection. They exchange tokens of love before he departs. Soon after, Proteus's father decides to send him to Milan as well, forcing the couple to separate. In Milan, Valentine has become a valued member of the Duke's court. He falls in love with Silvia, the Duke's daughter. She returns his affection, though her father wishes her to marry another man, named Thurio. Proteus arrives in Milan, sees Silvia, and immediately falls in love with her, forgetting Julia entirely. To remove his rival, Proteus betrays Valentine's plan to elope with Silvia. Valentine is caught, arrested, and banished from the city. Meanwhile, Julia, still loyal to Proteus, disguises herself as a male page and travels to Milan under the name Sebastian. She enters the service of Proteus, who uses her to deliver messages of love to Silvia. Julia performs her duties while concealing her identity. Silvia, for her part, continues to resist Proteus's advances. Eventually, Sylvia escapes the court to find Valentine. Along the way, she is captured by outlaws. Valentine, now living in exile among these outlaws, rescues her. Proteus also arrives and again attempts to win Sylvia's affection. When she refuses, he tries to force himself upon her. Julia, still in disguise, intervenes. She faints and her true identity is revealed. Confronted with her presence and her faithfulness, Proteus repents. Valentine forgives Proteus for his betrayal, and their friendship is restored. The Duke arrives, hears what has happened, and offers forgiveness to all. He consents to the marriages of Valentine and Sylvia, and of Proteus and Julia. The play concludes with an agreement to return to Verona. Though the play contains elements of mistaken identity, betrayal, and disguise, it resolves without lasting consequence. All tensions are resolved. No punishment is given. Friendships are preserved. The betrayals and misconduct are acknowledged and then forgotten. This play is often cited for its early exploration of romantic loyalty and friendship. In this context, it is simply the tale of two men who leave home, pursue love and return. What is broken is fixed. What is threatened is restored. One scene follows the next with minimal interruption. There are no asides or inner monologues. Events occur, one after the other, and by the final act, all is quiet again. The Merry Wives of Windsor is a comedy set in the English town of Windsor. It centres around Sir John Falstaff, a vain and ageing knight who is short on money. Believing himself charming, Falstaff devises a plan to improve his financial situation. He decides to seduce two wealthy, married women, Mistress Ford and Mistress Page. To save time and effort, he sends both women the exact same love letter, hoping to win their affections, and, eventually, access to their husbands' fortunes. However, Mistress Ford and Mistress Page quickly discover that they have received identical letters. Rather than becoming angry, they decide to play along and teach Falstaff a lesson. They conspire together to lead him on while plotting a series of humiliations. Their goal is not only to mock his arrogance, but to expose his intentions publicly and thoroughly. Falstaff's first attempted rendezvous with Mistress Ford takes place at her home. When her husband unexpectedly arrives, Falstaff is hidden in a laundry basket, which is then unceremoniously dumped into the Thames River. He is soaked and humiliated, but believes it to be a misunderstanding rather than part of a scheme. Undeterred, he tries again. For the second trick, Falstaff arrives disguised as an old woman, supposedly a local healer. This time, Master Ford, still suspicious of his wife, beats the disguised Falstaff and drives him out of the house. Once again, Falstaff is embarrassed, and once again, he fails to see the larger joke being played on him. Meanwhile, a subplot unfolds involving the courtship of Anne Page, the daughter of Mistress Page. She has three suitors: Dr. Caius, a French physician; Slender, a foolish young man favoured by Anne's father; and Fenton, the man Anne herself prefers. Each suitor tries to win Anne, while her parents disagree about who should marry her. These courtship efforts provide comic relief and misdirection, as disguises and mistaken identities abound. Eventually, the two wives plan a final trick. They convince Falstaff to meet them at night in Windsor Forest, dressed as the ghostly figure of Herne the Hunter, a local legend. The town's children, disguised as fairies and several adults in costume, ambush Falstaff, pinch him, and scare him into confessing his intentions. He is thoroughly ridiculed. At last he realises he has been deceived the entire time. After the prank is revealed, Falstaff accepts his embarrassment with mild good humour. Mistress Ford and Mistress Page forgive him, and the townspeople share a laugh at his expense. At the same time, it is revealed that Anne Page has run off and married Fenton, the suitor she truly loves. Despite her parents' earlier objections, the marriage is accepted, and the conflict is quietly resolved. The play ends with a sense of communal harmony. No one is severely punished. Social order is maintained. The lessons are learned gently, and all characters return to their lives slightly wiser, but unchanged in any fundamental way. Measure for Measure is set in Vienna, a city experiencing moral decline. At the start of the play, Duke Vincentio announces that he will temporarily leave the city and appoint a deputy, Lord Angelo, to govern in his absence. The Duke claims he is leaving for political reasons, but in truth, he wishes to observe the effects of strict law enforcement from a distance. Disguising himself as a friar, he remains in Vienna in secret. Angelo is known for his austere and puritanical nature. Once in power, he begins enforcing long-ignored laws against fornication. One of the first to be punished is Claudio, a young man who has impregnated his fiancée Juliet before their official wedding. Though the couple is betrothed and plans to marry, Angelo sentences Claudio to death to make an example of him. Claudio's sister Isabella is a novice in a convent. She is called upon to plead for her brother's life. When she meets Angelo, he is struck by her beauty and virtue. Though he presents himself as morally upright, he propositions her. He will spare Claudio's life only if Isabella agrees to sleep with him. Isabella refuses and threatens to expose him, but Angelo is confident that no one would believe her. Isabella informs the disguised Duke, who devises a plan. Mariana, a woman formerly engaged to Angelo and still in love with him, agrees to take Isabella's place in a secret rendezvous. This bed trick is successful. Angelo believes he has slept with Isabella, when in fact he has slept with Mariana. Despite his satisfaction, Angelo does not keep his promise and orders Claudio's execution anyway. However, the Duke, still disguised as a friar, intervenes and arranges to have Claudio spared in secret. A head from another prisoner is sent in his place to satisfy Angelo's order. The Duke then arranges a public return to the city. Upon his official return, the Duke stages a public hearing. Isabella accuses Angelo of coercion. Angelo denies it. Mariana also steps forward, revealing the bed trick. Still, Angelo refuses to admit wrongdoing. The Duke, still in disguise, pretends to dismiss the complaints, then reveals his true identity. Angelo is exposed, he begs for mercy, and Mariana pleads for his life. The Duke spares him and orders him to marry Mariana. Claudio, presumed dead, is revealed to be alive. He is reunited with Juliet, and they prepare to marry. Lucio, a bawdy character who has insulted the Duke throughout the play, is punished by being forced to marry a woman he previously abandoned. The Duke proposes marriage to Isabella, but her response is left unstated, providing an ambiguous conclusion. The play ends with justice, served in an orderly but softened manner. Punishments are delivered, but many are tempered with mercy. Although serious topics such as power, coercion, and sexual politics are addressed, the resolution is mild. Order is restored through calculated manipulation rather than open confrontation. Events are resolved, pairings are arranged, and the city returns to a state of control, if not clarity. The Comedy of Errors is a farce centred on mistaken identity. It follows two sets of identical twins who are separated at birth. One pair, named Antipholus, and the other pair, named Dromio, were born on the same day to different parents. Through a series of accidents, each Antipholus ends up with a Dromio as servant, and the two pairs are raised in separate cities, one in Ephesus and one in Syracuse. The play begins when Aegeon, a merchant from Syracuse and the father of one set of twins, arrives in Ephesus searching for his missing son. However, there is a law that prohibits Syracusians from entering Ephesus. Aegeon is arrested and given until the end of the day to raise a ransom or face execution. Meanwhile, Antipholus of Syracuse and his servant Dromio of Syracuse also arrive in Ephesus, unaware that they're identical counterparts. Antipholus of Ephesus and Dromio of Ephesus already live there. Confusion quickly ensues as townspeople, family members and servants mistake one twin for the other. Antipholus of Syracuse is repeatedly approached by strangers who seem to know him. He is invited to dinner by a woman who claims to be his wife, Adriana, who is actually married to Antipholus of Ephesus. He reluctantly goes along with it, confused but intrigued. Meanwhile, his Dromio is also mistaken for the other servant, and is accused of conversations and errands he does not remember undertaking. The real Antipholus of Ephesus is locked out of his own home, as his wife believes he is already inside. He grows increasingly angry and confused. He attempts to enter by force, is refused, and later is arrested. He protests that he does not know why he is being treated this way. The more he resists, the more irrational he appears to those around him. The mistaken identities lead to a series of increasingly absurd confrontations. Items are delivered to the wrong twin. Debts are demanded from the wrong man. People are accused of madness, infidelity, and deception. No one understands what is happening. Even the twins themselves begin to doubt their own sanity as the errors accumulate. Eventually, all parties are brought together in a public space. The Duke of Ephesus arrives to pass judgment on the confusion. Aegeon is brought forth and prepares to be executed, but his long-lost son, Antipholus of Ephesus, recognises him just in time. Soon after, Antipholus of Syracuse and Dromio of Syracuse also appear. The presence of both sets of twins at once finally resolves the misunderstandings. Aegeon is pardoned. The two Antipholuses are reunited as brothers. The two Dromios also acknowledge their bond. The mistaken identities are explained, and all parties reconcile. The confusion dissipates, order is restored, and the families make plans to live together in peace. The play ends with mutual recognition. Each pair of twins departs with his respective counterpart. The chaos of the day is resolved without bitterness. No lasting harm has occurred. The comedic disorder fades and symmetry is restored. Much Ado About Nothing takes place in the Italian town of Messina. The play opens with the return of Don Pedro, Prince of Aragon, and his men from a military campaign. Among them are two noblemen, Claudio, a young count, and Benedick, a confirmed bachelor with a sharp tongue. They are welcomed by Leonato, the governor of Messina, whose household includes his daughter Hero and his niece Beatrice. Claudio quickly falls in love with Hero and seeks Don Pedro's help in winning her hand. Don Pedro agrees to speak to Hero on Claudio's behalf at an upcoming masquerade ball. However, Don John, Don Pedro's illegitimate brother, is bitter and resentful. He begins plotting to sabotage Claudio's relationship out of spite. Meanwhile, a separate plot is formed to trick Benedick and Beatrice into falling in love with each other. They have a history of witty exchanges and mutual disdain, which makes them ideal targets for such a scheme. At the masquerade ball, Don Pedro successfully arranges an engagement between Claudio and Hero. Simultaneously, Beatrice and Benedick continue their verbal sparring. Their friends and family members, finding their mutual stubbornness amusing, set about fooling each of them into believing the other is secretly in love. Benedick overhears a staged conversation suggesting Beatrice pines for him. Beatrice, in turn, is told that Benedick is heartbroken over her. Both are moved by this misinformation and begin to reconsider their feelings. Meanwhile, Don John enacts his more malicious plan. He arranges for Claudio to witness what appears to be Hero in a compromising situation with another man. In reality, the woman is Hero's maid, Margaret, and the man is Baracchio, Don John's accomplice. Claudio is deceived and feels betrayed. At the wedding ceremony the next day, Claudio publicly shames Hero, accusing her of infidelity. She faints from the shock. To preserve her honour, Leonato and the friar claim she has died. The news spreads and Hero goes into hiding. Beatrice, outraged by the injustice, demands that Benedick challenge Claudio to a duel. Benedick, now committed to Beatrice, agrees. During this time, two inept members of the town watch, Dogberry and Verges, accidentally uncover Don John's plot by arresting Baracchio, who confesses everything. The truth is revealed. Claudio, remorseful, is told that he may marry Leonato's niece as penance, who turns out to be Hero in disguise. Their wedding proceeds as originally planned. At the same time, Benedick and Beatrice, now softened by affection, confess their love for each other. After some final teasing, they agree to marry. Don John's treachery is reported, and he is set to face punishment. The play concludes with dancing and plans for a double wedding. The story though filled with misunderstandings, ends with harmony restored. All romantic pairings are resolved. Conflicts are forgiven. No permanent damage remains. The action settles gently into celebration, and all characters are returned to their proper places. Love's Labours Lost takes place in the Kingdom of Navarre. The play begins with King Ferdinand of Navarre and 3 of his lords, Barone, Longueville, and Dumaine, agreeing to take an oath. They will dedicate themselves to 3 years of study and intellectual discipline. To maintain focus, they vow to abstain from the company of women, from indulgent pleasures, and from worldly distractions. Their goal is to pursue knowledge with total dedication. Barone is sceptical of the plan from the outset. He questions the practicality of such a strict lifestyle, but eventually agrees to follow it out of loyalty to the group. Almost immediately, the plan is challenged. The Princess of France arrives with 3 of her ladies, Rosalind, Maria, and Catherine, on a diplomatic mission. Because of the king's oath, the women are not allowed into the court and must instead camp in a field nearby. The men visit the women under the pretense of formal negotiations, but soon each man begins to fall in love. Ferdinand becomes interested in the princess. Barone is drawn to Rosalind, Longueville to Maria, and Dumaine to Catherine. The vows of abstinence begin to unravel as the men try to conceal their affections. In private, each one composes poems and makes secret plans to woo the woman he admires. Unbeknownst to each other, all 4 men have broken their oath. When they each discover that the others are equally guilty, they abandon pretense and resolve to pursue the women more openly. However, the women are aware of their shifting affections. They decide to test the men's sincerity. They disguise themselves by switching identities and wearing masks, causing the men to unknowingly court the wrong women. The men, embarrassed by their mistake, realise how easily they have been led by emotion. Meanwhile, a number of comic subplots unfold. Don Adriano de Armado, a verbose and eccentric Spaniard, competes for the affection of a country girl named Jaquenetta. He becomes a rival to the clownish Costard, who also pursues her. Letters are misdelivered, identities are mistaken, and declarations of love are misplaced, adding to the overall confusion. Toward the end of the play, the men attempt to express genuine love, having supposedly matured. However, just as romantic resolutions seem imminent, news arrives that the princess's father, the King of France, has died. The women must leave immediately to attend to matters of state. The mood shifts from light to sombre. The women challenge the men to prove their love through action, not words. Each man is given a task and told to wait a year before the women will consider marriage. The play ends with no marriages, no true unions, and no definitive resolution. Instead, the characters part ways with promises rather than celebrations. Unlike many of Shakespeare's comedies, Love's Labours Lost ends in suspension. The labour of love is not yet complete. The final image is one of delay and quiet reflection, rather than festivity or fulfilment. A Midsummer Night's Dream takes place in Athens and the surrounding forest. The central plot revolves around the preparations for the wedding of Duke Theseus and Hippolyta, Queen of the Amazons. At the beginning of the play, Aegeus, a nobleman, arrives to complain that his daughter Hermia refuses to marry Demetrius, the suitor he has chosen for her. Hermia insists she loves Lysander instead. Theseus gives her a choice: marry Demetrius, enter a convent, or face death. Hermia and Lysander choose to flee into the forest. Unbeknownst to them, Helena, who is in love with Demetrius, reveals their plan to him, hoping to win his affection. Demetrius follows the couple into the forest, and Helena follows Demetrius. All 4 young lovers soon find themselves entangled in a web of mistaken identities and magical interference. In the forest, the fairy king Oberon and the fairy queen Titania are having a dispute over a changeling child. To distract Titania and regain control, Oberon instructs his mischievous servant Puck to fetch a magical flower. When its juice is placed on a sleeping person's eyelids, it causes them to fall in love with the first creature they see upon waking. Oberon applies the potion to Titania, as she sleeps. Puck, meanwhile, is sent to use the same magic on Demetrius so he will return Helena's love. However, Puck mistakenly applies the potion to Lysander instead. When Lysander wakes and sees Helena, he falls hopelessly in love with her. Confused and distressed, Helena believes she is being mocked. As the night continues, Puck eventually enchants Demetrius as well, so both men are now in love with Helena. Hermia, left behind, is shocked by Lysander's change of heart and accuses Helena of stealing him. Oberon realises Puck's mistake and instructs him to correct it. After several further mix-ups and arguments among the lovers, Puck uses fog to separate them, and then places an antidote on Lysander's eyes. When they awaken, Demetrius loves Helena, and Lysander loves Hermia, resolving the romantic confusion. Meanwhile, a group of Athenian tradesmen are in the forest, rehearsing a play to be performed at the Duke's wedding. Among them is Bottom, a weaver who is transformed by Puck to have the head of a donkey. Titania, under the influence of the love potion, falls in love with him. She dotes on him until Oberon, satisfied with his prank, removes the spell from her. Titania is humiliated, but reconciled with Oberon. With all enchantments lifted, the lovers are found by Theseus and his hunting party. Theseus overrules Aegeus and allows the couples to marry according to their desires. Hermia with Lysander, and Helena with Demetrius. They return to Athens for a triple wedding: Theseus and Hippolyta, Lysander and Hermia, and Demetrius and Helena. The tradesmen perform their play, a clumsy and exaggerated version of the tragic tale of Pyramus and Thisbe. The audience finds it amusing. The play ends with Puck addressing the audience directly, suggesting that everything they saw may have been just a dream. Balance is restored. The forest empties. All ends quietly. The Merchant of Venice is set in the city of Venice and centres around a merchant named Antonio. At the beginning of the play, Antonio is melancholy for reasons he cannot explain. His close friend Bassanio needs money to court a wealthy heiress named Portia, who lives in the city of Belmont. Antonio wishes to help, but has all his wealth tied up in merchant ships at sea. To support Bassanio, Antonio agrees to borrow money on his credit. They approach Shylock, a Jewish moneylender who has a strained relationship with Antonio. Antonio has insulted Shylock in the past and publicly condemned his business. Despite this, Shylock agrees to lend 3,000 ducats, but with a condition. If Antonio fails to repay the loan on time, Shylock will be entitled to a pound of Antonio's flesh, to be taken from near his heart. Antonio, confident his ships will return with profit, agrees to the bond. Meanwhile, Portia is bound by her late father's will to marry the suitor who chooses correctly among 3 caskets: 1 gold, 1 silver, and 1 lead. Several noblemen attempt and fail. Bassanio travels to Belmont and chooses the lead casket, which contains Portia's portrait. He wins her hand. Portia gives him a ring, making him swear never to part with it. Her maid Nerissa does the same with Gratiano, another of Antonio's friends who has also come to Belmont. Back in Venice, Antonio's ships are lost at sea, and he is unable to repay Shylock. Shylock, bitter from years of mistreatment, and further aggrieved by the recent elopement of his daughter Jessica with a Christian, insists on collecting the pound of flesh. The Duke of Venice presides over the trial. Antonio faces death. No one can persuade Shylock to show mercy. At this point, Portia disguises herself as a young male lawyer and arrives at court with Nerissa, also in disguise. Portia argues that while Shylock is entitled to the pound of flesh, he is not entitled to any blood. Since it is impossible to remove flesh without spilling blood, Shylock's claim is invalid. The court turns against him. His wealth is confiscated, and he is forced to convert to Christianity and leave his estate to Jessica and her Christian husband. Portia, still in disguise, asks for Antonio's ring as a token of gratitude. He gives it to her, unaware of her identity. Nerissa obtains Gratiano's ring through a similar trick. Back in Belmont, the women reveal their disguises and return the rings, lightly scolding the men before forgiving them. Antonio learns that some of his ships have arrived safely after all, restoring his fortune. The play ends with all romantic pairs reunited, Bassanio and Portia, Gratiano and Nerissa, and Jessica and Lorenzo. Antonio remains single, but is no longer in debt or danger. The tone is restored to one of celebration, although Shylock's fate remains notably sombre. The conflicts are resolved within the rules of the law, and the characters return to their lives with a sense of restored order and quiet finality. As You Like It begins with a conflict between brothers. Orlando, the younger son of the late Sir Roland de Bois, feels mistreated by his elder brother Oliver, who denies him proper education and inheritance. Meanwhile, Duke Senior, the rightful ruler of the land, has been overthrown by his brother, Duke Frederick, and now lives in exile in the Forest of Arden with a group of loyal followers. His daughter Rosalind remains at court as a companion to Duke Frederick's daughter, Celia. Orlando proves his valour in a wrestling match, catching the attention of Rosalind. They fall in love at first sight. Shortly afterward, Duke Frederick banishes Rosalind from court. Celia, devoted to her cousin, chooses to accompany her into exile. Rosalind disguises herself as a young man named Ganymede, and Celia assumes the identity of Aliena. Together with the court fool Touchstone, they flee to the Forest of Arden. In the forest, various characters live in relative harmony, including Duke Senior and his loyal nobleman Jaques, who offers philosophical commentary and famously reflects that all the world's a stage. Orlando also escapes into the forest after learning of a plot by Oliver to kill him. He carves Rosalind's name into tree trunks and writes verses in her honour, unaware that she is nearby in disguise. Rosalind, still posing as Ganymede, encounters Orlando and offers to cure him of his love by pretending to be Rosalind in conversation. This leads to a series of staged courtship scenes where Orlando unknowingly courts the woman he already loves. These scenes allow Rosalind to test his sincerity while maintaining her hidden identity. Several other romantic subplots unfold. Touchstone becomes involved with a goat herd named Audrey. Silvius, a shepherd, pines for the indifferent Phoebe, who becomes infatuated with Ganymede, not realising he is actually Rosalind. These entanglements build layers of mistaken identity and mismatched affections. Back at court, Duke Frederick learns that his daughter Celia has fled. He raises an army to pursue Duke Senior in the forest. However, on the verge of conflict, Duke Frederick experiences a sudden religious awakening and renounces the world, deciding to live a monastic life. This resolves the political tension without violence. Eventually, Rosalind reveals her true identity. The couples are realigned. Orlando and Rosalind, Celia and Oliver, who has experienced a moral transformation, Touchstone and Audrey, and Silvius and Phoebe, who agrees to marry him once she learns Ganymede is not real. The play concludes with multiple weddings. The forest, once a place of exile, becomes a site of reunion and renewal. With the return of Duke Senior to power and the restoration of familial bonds, harmony is achieved. Jaques chooses not to return to court and instead follows Duke Frederick into contemplation. The rest of the characters prepare to resume life, now reordered and clarified. The play closes with celebration, but the energy remains gentle. The resolution is complete, yet calm. The complexities of identity, love and power are all unravelled with minimal disruption. Everything ends as it should, without haste or lingering uncertainty. The Taming of the Shrew is structured with a framing device known as the induction. In this outer layer, a drunken tinker named Christopher Sly is tricked into believing he is a nobleman. A group of players performs a play for his entertainment. The main story unfolds as this inner play. The plot centres on two sisters in the city of Padua. The younger, Bianca, is demure and much sought after by suitors. However, her father, Baptista, insists that she cannot marry until her older sister, Katharina, is wed. Katharina is sharp-tongued, outspoken, and resistant to authority. Because of her temperament, she is considered unmarriageable and no one dares court her. Enter Petruchio, a man from Verona who arrives in Padua seeking a wealthy wife. Learning that Katharina has a large dowry, he agrees to court her. He is warned of her difficult nature, but is undeterred. Petruchio pursues her with persistence and confidence, insisting publicly that she is kind and gentle, even when she openly mocks and resists him. Baptista, eager to see Katharina married, consents to the union. On the wedding day, Petruchio arrives late and dressed in bizarre clothing. He behaves erratically throughout the ceremony, asserting dominance and ignoring social norms. After the wedding, he takes Katharina away to his country home, where his efforts to tame her begin in earnest. Petruchio uses a variety of methods to assert control. He deprives Katharina of food and sleep under the pretense that nothing is good enough for her. He contradicts her opinions, praises things she disapproves of, and insists on his version of reality. Over time, Katharina ceases to argue. Whether her transformation is sincere or strategic remains open to interpretation, but she begins to echo Petruchio's assertions without protest. Meanwhile, several suitors vie for Bianca's hand. Lucentio, a young nobleman, disguises himself as a tutor to get close to her. His servant, Tranio, poses as Lucentio to negotiate with Baptista. The deception is successful. Bianca prefers Lucentio and eventually agrees to marry him. A series of mistaken identities and impersonations unfolds, including another suitor, Hortensio, also posing as a tutor. In the end, the true identities are revealed, and Lucentio wins Bianca's hand. The play concludes with a communal feast. Petruchio, Lucentio, and Hortensio compare their wives' obedience. A test is proposed. Each man will summon his wife, and the most obedient will be declared the winner. Bianca and the other woman do not come when called. Katharina, however, responds promptly and delivers a long speech on a wife's duty to her husband. She describes obedience as a virtue and encourages other women to follow her example. The play ends with Petruchio proclaiming victory and expressing satisfaction with his wife. The characters depart in a mood of light triumph and social order restored. Though the tone remains comedic, the underlying dynamics invite varying interpretations. In this telling, the sequence of events is presented plainly. A challenge is posed, a courtship proceeds, and a result is achieved. The structure holds, the conflict closes, the curtain falls. All's well that ends well begins in the court of the Countess of Roussillon. Her son, Bertram, is preparing to leave for Paris to serve the King of France. Also residing in the Countess's household is Helena, the orphan daughter of a respected physician. Though of lower social status, Helena has long been in love with Bertram. He, however, does not return her affection and appears unaware of her feelings. The King of France is suffering from an incurable illness. Helena, having inherited her father's medical knowledge, travels to Paris and offers to heal the king. In exchange, she requests the right to choose a husband from among the royal court should she succeed. The king agrees. Helena's treatment works, and the king keeps his promise. She chooses Bertram. He is displeased by the match, feeling she's beneath him socially, but is compelled by the king's command to marry her. After the wedding, Bertram immediately leaves for Italy to avoid living with Helena. He sends a letter stating that he will never acknowledge her as his wife until she can obtain his family ring and bear his child, two conditions he believes are impossible. Helena, rather than accept defeat, devises a plan to fulfill his demands. Bertram joins the army in Florence and begins to court a local woman named Diana. Helena travels there in disguise and befriends Diana. Together, they orchestrate a bed trick. Diana agrees to meet Bertram, but when the time comes, Helena secretly takes her place. In the darkness, Bertram believes he is with Diana, but it is actually Helena. She also arranges to obtain his ring during the encounter, fulfilling both of his stated conditions without his knowledge. Meanwhile, Bertram returns to France, unaware of Helena's presence in Florence or her actions. He believes she has died during her travels. Back at the royal court, various events converge. Bertram's servant Parolles, previously arrogant and boastful, has been exposed as a coward and liar in a subplot involving fabricated military intelligence. He is humiliated, but spared further punishment. The story concludes with a gathering at court. Helena appears and reveals her identity, presenting the ring and announcing that she is pregnant with Bertram's child. Bertram, surprised and caught off guard, agrees to accept her as his wife. The king declares satisfaction with the outcome, and the central conflict is resolved. Although the resolution is sudden, it brings the story to a close. Promises have been fulfilled. The conditions Bertram believed to be unattainable are met. The reluctant husband becomes, at least outwardly, a willing one. Helena's cleverness is rewarded, and social harmony is restored. There are questions that remain about sincerity, agency, and choice, but these are not addressed within the play. Events conclude on a note of formal completion. The title is echoed in the structure. All ends well, or at least it does so within the framework of the story. The court, the household, and the marriage are all returned to order. Twelfth Night begins with a shipwreck. Viola, a young noblewoman, is separated from her twin brother Sebastian and believes him to have drowned. She washes ashore in the land of Illyria. Alone and without means, Viola decides to disguise herself as a young man and take service with Duke Orsino, calling herself Cesario. Duke Orsino is in love with Lady Olivia, a wealthy countess who has sworn off the company of men while mourning the death of her brother. Orsino sends Cesario, Viola in disguise, to woo Olivia on his behalf. Olivia, however, is not moved by Orsino's message. Instead, she becomes infatuated with Cesario, unaware of Viola's true identity. Viola, now caught in a complicated position, has secretly fallen in love with Orsino, creating a love triangle where Orsino loves Olivia, Olivia loves Cesario, and Cesario is actually Viola, who loves Orsino. Viola continues to carry out Orsino's requests while concealing her true feelings and identity. Meanwhile, in Olivia's household, a group of comic characters creates a subplot of their own. Sir Toby Belch, Olivia's uncle, lives idly off her wealth and encourages the foolish Sir Andrew Aguecheek to court Olivia. Alongside Maria, Olivia's maid, and Feste, the household fool, they devise a prank on the steward Malvolio, who is perceived as pompous and self-righteous. The prank involves a forged letter, supposedly from Olivia, suggesting she is in love with Malvolio and instructing him to behave oddly, to smile constantly, wear yellow stockings, and cross garters, all of which she supposedly favours. Malvolio follows these instructions and is thought to have gone mad. He is locked in a dark room and mocked by Feste, who disguises himself as a priest. Back in the main plot, Sebastian, Viola's twin brother, arrives in Illyria, having survived the shipwreck. He is quickly mistaken for Cesario by Olivia, who proposes marriage. Sebastian, confused but willing, agrees. They are secretly married. This leads to further confusion when Cesario, actually Viola, is accused of betrayal and false promises by Olivia. A duel nearly occurs between Cesario and Sir Andrew, who also mistakes Viola for Sebastian. The confusion escalates until both twins appear in the same place at the same time. The resemblance is undeniable, and their true identities are revealed. Viola removes her disguise and declares her love for Orsino. He, now aware of her true identity, returns her affection. Olivia is content with her marriage to Sebastian, having thought him to be Cesario. The twin reunion is complete, and the love triangle is resolved into two pairs. Malvolio is released and, feeling wronged, vows revenge on those who humiliated him. His story does not end in reconciliation, but his exit does not disrupt the festive conclusion. The play ends with multiple unions and a restoration of identity. disguises are shed, relationships are clarified, and order is restored. Though some threads remain unsettled, the atmosphere remains celebratory. Music, marriage, and recognition bring the tale to a close as mistaken affections give way to mutual understanding. The Winter's Tale begins in the kingdom of Sicilia, where King Leontes hosts his childhood friend, King Polixenes of Bohemia. At first, the two are joyful in each other's company. However, Leontes soon becomes consumed by irrational jealousy. He suspects that his wife, Queen Hermione, has been unfaithful to him with Polixenes, and that the child she now carries is not his. Leontes urges Polixenes to extend his stay, but when Polixenes declines, Leontes has him poisoned. The plan fails when Camillo, a loyal courtier, warns Polixenes and flees with him to Bohemia. Leontes, enraged by their departure, publicly accuses Hermione of adultery and imprisons her. Despite her protests and her dignified defense during a formal trial, Leontes refuses to believe in her innocence. Their son, Mamilius, distressed by the events, falls ill and dies. Hermione gives birth to a daughter in prison. Paulina, a noblewoman, presents the newborn to Leontes, hoping to soften his heart. Instead, he orders the child to be abandoned in the wilderness and declares that Hermione must remain in custody. Soon after, news arrives that Mamilius is dead. The shock causes Hermione to collapse. Paulina reports that she too has died. Leontes is struck with remorse and vows to spend the rest of his life in repentance. The abandoned baby is carried away to Bohemia by Antigonus, Paulina's husband. There he leaves the child with a bundle of tokens identifying her parentage. As he departs, he is chased off stage by a bear and never returns. The child, Perdita, is found by a shepherd and raised as his daughter. 16 years pass. Perdita has grown into a beautiful young woman, unaware of her royal lineage. She has caught the attention of Prince Florizel, the son of Polixenes. They fall in love. Polixenes, disapproving of his son's interest in a commoner, disguises himself and attends a rural festival where Perdita and Florizel celebrate their affection. Upon revealing his identity, he forbids the match and threatens to disinherit Florizel. Camillo, still loyal and wise, advises the young lovers to flee to Sicilia and seek protection from Leontes, who has long mourned his past actions. They follow this advice, taking the shepherd and his son with them. Once in Sicilia, identities are revealed, and Leontes learns that Perdita is his daughter. The family is reunited. Polixenes arrives and, now understanding the truth, approves the union between Perdita and Florizel. The play concludes with a final revelation. Paulina takes the court to view a statue of Hermione, which she claims was made in her memory. As the group looks on, the statue begins to move. It is not stone, but Hermione herself, who has been hidden away for 16 years. Leontes and Hermione are reunited in silence and wonder. The ending offers reconciliation and renewal. Grief is tempered by joy. Though time has passed and pain has occurred, the family is restored. Wrongs are acknowledged and forgiveness is granted. The winter yields to spring. The tale closes not in despair, but in quiet resolution. King John centres on the turbulent reign of the English monarch, John, who has claimed the throne following the death of his brother, King Richard the Lionheart. The play begins with a diplomatic dispute. France supports Arthur, the young son of John's deceased elder brother Geoffrey, as the rightful heir to the English crown. To press his claim, King Philip of France prepares for war. John, refusing to concede, marches to defend his rule. Meanwhile, in a parallel plot, a young man named Philip is brought to court by his mother, who claims that he is the illegitimate son of Richard the Lionheart. John legitimizes the young man, bestows knighthood upon him, and gives him the title Sir Richard Plantagenet. He becomes known as the Bastard, Loyal, plain-spoken and witty, the bastard provides commentary on the events that follow and supports King John through the unfolding conflict. The two armies meet outside the city of Angers. The citizens refuse to acknowledge either claimant as king unless the matter is resolved peacefully. Both sides propose alliances and strategic marriages. A temporary truce is achieved when John's niece, Blanche of Castile, is married to the Dauphin, Louis, the son of King Philip. In exchange, France recognizes John as King of England. However, this peace is short-lived. Cardinal Pandulph, a papal envoy, arrives and demands that John submit to the authority of the Pope, who has appointed Stephen Langton as Archbishop of Canterbury. John refuses, prompting the Church to excommunicate him. France, using this as justification, renews its alliance with Arthur and resumes hostilities against England. John captures Arthur and, fearing that he will be used as a symbol of rebellion, considers having him killed. Hubert, a loyal follower, is ordered to execute the boy, but ultimately cannot bring himself to do it. Arthur attempts to escape captivity and dies accidentally in the process. His death, though unintentional, causes public outrage. Nobles abandon John, believing he is responsible. The bastard remains loyal and tries to rally support for the king. Meanwhile, the Dauphin invades England with the support of the rebel nobles. As tensions rise, John attempts to reconcile with the church and submits to papal authority. The move helps to weaken the French position. Some English nobles return to John's side. John's health begins to fail. He is poisoned by a disgruntled monk at a monastery. As he lies dying, his son Prince Henry arrives. The bastard pledges loyalty to the young prince, urging unity and resistance against foreign invasion. The Dauphin, now losing support, begins to retreat. The play ends with the death of King John and the peaceful succession of Prince Henry. The bastard delivers the final words, expressing hope for stability and national unity. The conflict concludes not with triumph, but with transition. Power is transferred, England remains intact. The nation, bruised but unbroken, moves forward into the next chapter of its monarchy. Richard II begins with a dispute between two noblemen, Henry Bolingbroke and Thomas Mowbray. They accuse each other of treason before King Richard. Rather than allow them to resolve the matter through a formal duel, Richard intervenes and banishes both men, Bolingbroke for 10 years, later reduced to 6, and Mowbray for life. This decision unsettles the nobility and casts doubt on Richard's leadership. Soon after, Bolingbroke's father, John of Gaunt, dies. Richard seizes his estate to fund a military campaign in Ireland, bypassing Bolingbroke's inheritance. This act is seen as a violation of noble rights and further erodes Richard's support among the English lords. While Richard leaves for Ireland, Bolingbroke returns from exile, raising support to reclaim his inheritance. His cause gains momentum, drawing the allegiance of discontented nobles and commoners alike. As Bolingbroke gathers strength, Richard's authority collapses. His advisors, including Bushy, Bagot and Green, are executed or flee. When Richard returns from Ireland, he finds himself increasingly isolated. He meets Bolingbroke at Flint Castle, where he initially tries to maintain regal dignity, speaking in poetic and philosophical terms. However, he soon recognizes the shift in power and surrenders. Bolingbroke, publicly respectful, insists he only seeks his rightful inheritance. Yet, with Richard imprisoned and the throne vacant, Bolingbroke is encouraged by his supporters to assume the crown. In a formal ceremony, Richard is forced to abdicate. He symbolically hands over the crown and the sceptre, offering a lengthy reflection on the fall of kings and the fragility of power. Bolingbroke becomes King Henry IV. Richard is imprisoned in Pomfret Castle, where he reflects on identity, loss, and the meaning of kingship. His language becomes increasingly introspective and philosophical. Though he has been stripped of power, his words carry a sense of tragic dignity. Meanwhile, supporters of the former king plot to restore him, but their conspiracy is uncovered and crushed. In the final act, Richard is murdered in prison by Sir Piers of Exton, who believes he is acting on the new king's unspoken wishes. When Henry IV learns of the murder, he is disturbed and disavows the act. He vows to make a pilgrimage to atone for the bloodshed, though whether this intention is fulfilled remains uncertain. The play concludes not with celebration, but with regret and ambiguity. Richard's fall is complete, but his poetic voice lingers. Bolingbroke's rise to power is successful, yet morally complex. The transfer of kingship is not smooth, but marred by betrayal and death. The foundations of divine right and absolute monarchy are questioned. Rather than presenting a clear resolution, the play ends in quiet unease. The new reign begins under the shadow of a fallen king. Questions of legitimacy and loyalty remain unresolved. The throne has been claimed but not cleansed. A new chapter begins, burdened by the choices that brought it into being. Henry IV, Part 1, begins with King Henry IV expressing his desire to lead a crusade to the Holy Land. However, internal unrest in England prevents this. The king faces political instability and rebellion from powerful nobles who helped him gain the throne but now feel betrayed. Chief among these is Henry Percy, known as Hotspur, a brave and impulsive warrior who refuses to turn over prisoners captured in battle. His father, the Earl of Northumberland, and his uncle, the Earl of Worcester, support him in open rebellion against the king. Meanwhile, Prince Hal, the king's son and heir, spends his time in taverns, associating with commoners and thieves. His closest companion is Sir John Falstaff, an aging, corpulent knight who provides comic relief through his drunkenness, wit and cowardice. Hal's behaviour disappoints the king and causes concern about his suitability as a future ruler. However, Hal reveals in private that he plans to reform his character and surprise everyone with his transformation when the time is right. The rebels, including Hotspur, gather their forces in the north. They are joined by other discontented nobles, including the Scottish leader Douglas and the Welsh magician Owen Glendower. A complex network of alliances begins to form, but tensions and rivalries within the rebel camp weaken their position. Hotspur, though valorous, is impulsive and often at odds with his allies. Back in London, Hal continues his life of leisure, but receives word that he must prepare for war. He reconciles with his father in a serious conversation where the king expresses disappointment but also hope. Hal promises to redeem himself through courage and honour on the battlefield. He takes command of his own forces and joins the king's army in preparation for open conflict. The climactic event of the play is the Battle of Shrewsbury. Both sides gather and the stakes are high. Falstaff participates, though he avoids combat and fakes his own death to escape danger. Prince Hal distinguishes himself in battle, fighting bravely and honourably. He confronts Hotspur in a duel, and after an even match, Hal kills him. With Hotspur's death, the rebel cause begins to crumble. After the battle, Hal encounters the seemingly dead Falstaff and mourns his passing. When Falstaff suddenly rises, claiming he killed Hotspur, Hal allows him to take credit. Though amused, Hal does not expose the lie, reinforcing the complex dynamic between them. The play ends with the king planning further campaigns against the remaining rebels. Though the immediate threat is over, unrest continues. Prince Hal has taken a step toward maturity, proving his valour and beginning to earn his father's respect. Falstaff remains as a lingering reminder of Hal's former life, both comedic and cautionary. The conflict between duty and indulgence, order and rebellion, remains unresolved. The crown is secure for now, but tensions persist. The kingdom is quiet, but not at peace. The story will continue. Henry IV, Part 2 continues the events of its predecessor. The kingdom remains unstable. Though Hotspur is dead and the rebellion weakened, other threats persist. The Archbishop of York, Lord Mowbray, and other nobles continue to oppose King Henry IV. The play moves between two worlds, the royal court, where politics and illness dominate, and the taverns and streets, where Falstaff and the lower classes provide commentary and distraction. King Henry is weary, his health is declining, and he worries about the future. He fears that his son, Prince Hal, is unworthy. He recalls how he usurped the throne from Richard II and wonders whether divine justice will punish him. The burden of kingship weighs heavily, and his growing illness reflects the kingdom's instability. Prince Hal remains absent from court for much of the play, spending time among the common people. Falstaff, meanwhile, continues to drink, lie, and recruit soldiers by taking bribes and offering exemptions. He surrounds himself with a motley group of companions, including Justice Shallow, a simple landowner, and various incompetent recruits. These scenes are comic but also tinged with decay and delusion. In the north, the rebels prepare for battle. However, Prince John, the king's second son, employs a strategy of diplomacy. He meets with the rebel leaders and offers peaceful terms. When they agree and disband their forces, he immediately arrests them for treason. This action ends the rebellion, but casts a shadow over the royal cause. Victory is achieved through manipulation rather than combat. As the rebellion collapses, King Henry's condition worsens. He becomes bedridden and reflective. Believing he is near death, he instructs his courtiers and prepares for the transition of power. Prince Hal visits the dying king. Finding him asleep, Hal mistakenly believes he has died. He takes the crown and contemplates the loneliness and weight of monarchy. When the king awakens and sees Hal with the crown, he is initially angry, but is then reassured by Hal's explanation. The two reconcile. The king dies, and Hal becomes King Henry V. The coronation marks a turning point. Falstaff, believing that his former friend will now elevate him, rushes to the ceremony. He boasts to his companions that he will soon have power and wealth. However, when Falstaff addresses the new king in public, Henry V rejects him. He declares, "I know thee not, old man." Falstaff is instructed to withdraw from court and live quietly, with a modest allowance but no official role. The play ends with mixed tones. The rebellion is crushed. The old king has passed. The new king has assumed the crown with seriousness. Prince Hal has become Henry V, casting aside his former life and companions. Falstaff, once central, is now obsolete. Comic relief gives way to resolution. Order is restored, but at a cost. The youthful freedom is gone. A new reign begins with hope, gravity, and the silence left by those no longer welcome in its light. Henry V begins shortly after Prince Hal has ascended to the throne and become King Henry V. The former wayward prince is now transformed. He is focused, dignified, and committed to ruling wisely. The kingdom, previously divided by rebellion and uncertainty, begins to stabilize under his leadership. The play opens with the Archbishop of Canterbury discussing a proposal to launch a campaign in France, both to unify the country and to assert a historical claim to the French throne. Henry receives an insulting gift from the Dauphin of France, a box of tennis balls, mocking his youthful reputation. This provocation strengthens his resolve. He declares his intention to invade France, citing ancient English claims through Edward III and the Salic Law. Parliament and the clergy support the war. Henry prepares for the campaign with both political calculation and spiritual solemnity. Before departing, Henry uncovers a plot against him involving 3 English traitors. He confronts them personally, exposing their plans and executing them. This early display of justice sets the tone for his rule. He then sails to France with his army, beginning a military campaign that combines strategy, diplomacy, and speeches designed to rally morale. The campaign is difficult. The English forces are outnumbered, ill and exhausted. At Harfleur, Henry delivers a rousing speech to inspire the troops. "Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more. The town eventually surrenders. However, the harsh conditions and extended conflict continue to weaken the English forces. On the eve of the Battle of Agincourt, Henry disguises himself and walks among his soldiers to gauge their spirits. He converses with common soldiers who question the justice of the king's cause and the burdens of leadership. This moment of reflection underscores Henry's awareness of the weight of kingship and the cost of war. The next day, Henry delivers the famous St. Crispin's Day speech, emphasizing honour, brotherhood, and shared glory. Though outnumbered, the English achieve a decisive victory at Agincourt. The French suffer massive losses, including many nobles. The English casualties are minimal. The victory is seen as miraculous and divinely sanctioned. In the aftermath, Henry seeks to secure peace through diplomacy. He courts Princess Catherine of France as part of the treaty negotiations. Their meeting is awkward and formal, but Henry presses his suit with charm and persistence. Eventually, the French king agrees to a treaty that names Henry as heir to the French throne and gives him Catherine in marriage. The play ends with an apparent triumph. Henry has proven himself a capable and charismatic leader. He has unified his kingdom, achieved military glory, and secured a dynastic claim to France. Yet the final lines delivered by the chorus remind the audience that Henry's early death and the weakness of his heir will undo much of what he achieved. Victory is won, but it is not permanent. Greatness is fleeting. The king is praised, the land is calm, but the shadow of history looms beyond the final page. Henry VI Part 1 begins in the wake of King Henry V's death. England mourns the loss of a powerful ruler and immediately begins to fracture under his successor, the young and inexperienced King Henry VI. The realm is divided between competing factions. Power struggles and political rivalries take root as England faces renewed conflict in France. The English war effort, previously dominant under Henry V, begins to falter. Joan of Arc, known as Joan la Pucelle in the play, emerges as a powerful figure leading the French. She claims divine inspiration and rallies French forces. Under her guidance, the French recapture several key cities, including Orleans. The English, led by commanders such as Talbot, struggle to maintain control. Talbot becomes the central military figure, representing English honour and valour. At court, tensions grow between noble houses. Richard Plantagenet, heir to the House of York, seeks to reclaim his family's titles and status. He gains support from influential figures and begins to solidify his position against the Lancastrian branch, led by the Duke of Somerset. These early seeds of discord foreshadow the Wars of the Roses, a civil war that will dominate later parts of the Henry VI trilogy. Meanwhile, King Henry is presented as pious, passive, and heavily influenced by his advisors. He lacks the force of will seen in his father, and others quickly fill the vacuum of power. Political manoeuvring overshadows the governance of the realm. The nobility grows increasingly self-serving, and loyalty to the crown weakens. The war in France continues, with varying success for both sides. The English capture Joan of Arc, who is later tried for witchcraft and burned at the stake. Her portrayal in the play mixes historical narrative with English nationalist sentiment. She is cast not only as a military leader, but also as a manipulative figure who relies on supernatural aid. Her death marks a turning point, but it does not restore English dominance. The play also introduces key figures who will become central in the coming conflicts. The rivalry between York and Somerset intensifies, leading to the symbolic moment in the Temple Garden, where nobles choose either a red rose Lancaster or a white rose York, physically manifesting the division of the country. As England continues to lose ground in France, alliances begin to form and fracture back home. In a politically motivated move, Henry agrees to marry Margaret of Anjou, a French noblewoman. The match is orchestrated by the Earl of Suffolk, who gains influence over the king by facilitating the marriage. This union is unpopular with many English nobles and viewed as a concession to the French. The play ends without resolution. France is slipping from England's grasp. The king is surrounded by ambitious nobles. The seeds of civil war have been sown. Henry VI, young and idealistic, is unequipped for the turbulence ahead. The empire weakens. The unity of England begins to dissolve. The fall continues, slowly, steadily, without any clear hero to halt the descent. Henry VI Part 2 begins with the arrival of Queen Margaret, newly married to King Henry VI. The marriage, arranged at the end of the previous play, is already a source of tension. As part of the marriage treaty, England has ceded valuable territories in France, angering many nobles. The growing dissatisfaction with the crown becomes the backdrop for an increasingly unstable court. Margaret is politically assertive and becomes closely allied with the Duke of Suffolk, who orchestrated the marriage and now exerts significant influence over the king. Their relationship, possibly romantic, is resented by other members of the nobility. Chief among the king's critics is the Duke of Gloucester, Lord Protector of the realm and Henry's uncle. He is widely respected and seen as a stabilising force, but his popularity makes him a target. Suffolk, Margaret, and the ambitious Cardinal Beaufort conspire to remove Gloucester. They first discredit his wife, Eleanor, who is accused of dabbling in sorcery to secure her husband's power. She is arrested and humiliated. Gloucester is later accused of treason, and though no evidence is produced, he is imprisoned and then murdered in secret. His death sends shockwaves through the court and removes one of the few truly loyal figures. With Gloucester gone, the king becomes increasingly passive and withdrawn. Queen Margaret takes a more active role, while court factions grow bolder. The Duke of York, Richard Plantagenet, begins to openly challenge the Lancastrian rule. He asserts his claim to the throne, believing his lineage gives him greater right than Henry VI. Though he initially pretends loyalty, York secretly plans rebellion. In the meantime, popular unrest erupts. Jack Cade, a commoner claiming noble blood, leads a peasant revolt in Kent. Exploiting widespread dissatisfaction with taxation and corruption, Cade's forces march on London. They overrun the city briefly, and disorder spreads. However, the rebellion is ultimately crushed. Cade is pursued and killed. The uprising exposes the fragility of the monarchy and the deep division between the ruling elite and the common people. As the court struggles to restore order, York advances his plans. He raises an army under the pretense of defending England from Irish rebels, but his true goal is to seize power. When York returns, he is met by Queen Margaret's forces. Battles begin between York's faction and the Loyalists. These early conflicts mark the beginning of the Wars of the Roses. Suffolk, once the Queen's favourite, falls from grace. He is captured at sea and executed. The court begins to turn on itself. Trust is rare, and violence becomes the language of politics. The king, devout and peace-loving, is unable to control the rising tide of ambition and bloodshed. The play ends in a state of chaos. Noble houses prepare for open war. The monarchy, weakened by internal decay, begins to collapse. The crown rests uneasily on Henry's head. The nation fractures further. War is no longer a threat. It is an inevitability. The descent into civil conflict is no longer hidden. It has begun. Henry VI Part 3 begins in the aftermath of open rebellion. The Duke of York presses his claim to the English throne, leading to a confrontation with King Henry VI. Parliament meets to negotiate a settlement. In an effort to avoid further bloodshed, Henry agrees to name York as his heir, bypassing his own son, Prince Edward. This compromise enrages Queen Margaret, who refuses to accept the disinheritance of her child. She vows to fight for her son's rights. Conflict resumes almost immediately. Margaret raises an army and defeats York's forces. In a brutal act, she personally mocks and murders York after the Battle of Wakefield. His son, Edward, vows revenge. Alongside his brothers George and Richard, he leads the House of York in a renewed campaign against the Lancastrians. The war intensifies, with battles occurring frequently, alliances shifting rapidly, and loyalties constantly tested. King Henry, meanwhile, is increasingly marginalised. He retreats into passivity, preferring religious solitude to political engagement. During a brief moment of peace, he reflects on the simplicity of a shepherd's life, contrasting it with the burdens of kingship. His introspection underscores the tragedy of a ruler unsuited to an era of relentless violence. Edward of York, now a formidable leader, defeats the Lancastrian forces and declares himself King Edward IV. He is crowned and takes control of the government. However, his reign is immediately complicated by personal decisions. Against the advice of his advisors, he secretly marries Lady Elizabeth Grey, a widow of Lancastrian loyalty. This angers the Earl of Warwick, a powerful noble who had arranged a politically advantageous match for Edward. Feeling betrayed, Warwick changes sides and joins Margaret in her ongoing resistance. Warwick captures King Edward IV and briefly restores Henry VI to the throne. However, Edward escapes, regroups, and defeats Warwick in battle. Warwick is killed, and Henry is again imprisoned in the Tower of London. Queen Margaret returns to England with a French army, but is defeated at the Battle of Tewkesbury. Her son, Prince Edward, is captured and executed by Edward's brothers, including Richard, who begins to reveal his cold ambition. With Margaret defeated, Warwick dead, and Henry imprisoned once more, the House of York appears triumphant. But unity is fragile. Richard begins to hint at his desire for the crown. He delivers a soliloquy outlining his ruthless intentions and his belief in power over morality. His ambitions foreshadow the violence yet to come. The play ends with a grim resolution. Henry VI, broken and resigned, is murdered in the Tower by Richard. The killing is silent and final. With Henry's death, the Lancastrian line is extinguished, and Yorkist rule appears secure. But beneath the surface, ambition continues to stir. The wars have reached a pause, but not a conclusion. Blood has been spilled, power has changed hands, and the throne has been claimed. Yet peace remains elusive. One dynasty falls, another rises, and in the silence of the Tower, the seeds of future conflict take root once again. Richard III begins in the aftermath of civil war. The House of York has emerged victorious, and Richard, Duke of Gloucester, brother to King Edward IV, opens the play with a monologue declaring his intent to seize the throne. Though peace has returned to England, Richard claims he is not suited for peace or love. Born with a physical deformity and denied affection, he turns instead to manipulation and power. Richard begins by orchestrating the downfall of his brother Clarence, who stands between him and the crown. He convinces King Edward that Clarence is a threat, leading to Clarence's imprisonment and eventual murder. Richard pretends to grieve while secretly arranging the deed. His deception is total, and no one suspects him. He then turns his attention to Lady Anne, the widow of Prince Edward, whom Richard helped to kill. In a display of audacious manipulation, he woos and wins her, despite her hatred. She agrees to marry him, seduced by his rhetoric and confidence. It is a shocking victory, and further demonstrates his cunning. King Edward IV, already ill, tries to reconcile the court, but the atmosphere remains tense. Upon his death, Richard positions himself as protector to Edward's two young sons, the heirs to the throne. With support from influential nobles, Richard begins systematically eliminating rivals. He imprisons the boys in the Tower of London and arranges for the deaths of anyone who might oppose his path to power. Through a combination of fear, flattery, and force, Richard has himself declared king. As King Richard III, he consolidates power but begins to lose control of events. His allies grow uneasy. The nobles he once manipulated start to doubt him. He has Lady Anne killed and spreads fear throughout the realm. His tyranny becomes more visible. Meanwhile, the former Queen Margaret, now an old and bitter presence at court, returns to curse those who destroyed her family. Her prophecies begin to come true. Queen Elizabeth, widow of Edward IV, mourns her lost children and resists Richard's plans to marry her daughter. The women of the court form a chorus of grief, warning of the doom that Richard's reign will bring. Opposition builds as Henry Tudor, a distant Lancastrian claimant, raises an army to challenge Richard. Many nobles defect, including the powerful Duke of Buckingham, who is later executed for his betrayal. Richard, increasingly isolated, prepares for battle. The final conflict occurs at the Battle of Bosworth Field. The night before the battle, Richard is haunted by the ghosts of those he has murdered. Each spirit curses him and blesses Henry's cause. On the battlefield, Richard fights bravely but desperately. He famously cries out, "A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" before being defeated and killed. Henry Tudor takes the crown as King Henry VII, vowing to unite the warring houses of York and Lancaster through marriage. The Wars of the Roses are declared over. The play ends with silence returning to England. The tyrant is gone. A new era begins, not with joy, but with weary resolution. The kingdom has paid a heavy price. Henry VIII opens with a scene of political spectacle. Two noblemen discuss the growing influence of Cardinal Wolsey, the king's powerful advisor. Wolsey is ambitious, skilled in diplomacy, and deeply involved in foreign policy. Yet his rise has made him many enemies, and suspicion surrounds his motives. The tone is one of courtly manoeuvring, with alliances and rivalries carefully managed behind public displays of loyalty. At the centre is King Henry VIII himself, initially portrayed as a majestic and confident monarch. The early focus falls on Buckingham, a nobleman accused of treason on thin evidence. Though Buckingham protests his innocence, he is tried and executed. His fall is widely seen as the result of Wolsey's manipulation, signalling the cardinal's formidable control over court affairs. Attention then shifts to Queen Catherine, Henry's first wife. She enjoys widespread respect for her piety and dignity, but Henry begins to question the legality of their marriage. Having failed to produce a male heir, Catherine's position weakens. Henry turns his interest toward Anne Boleyn, a lady-in-waiting at court. As his affections shift, so too do the politics of the realm. Wolsey attempts to maintain his influence by managing the king's desire for divorce. He convenes a trial to determine the validity of Henry and Catherine's marriage, but Catherine refuses to cooperate. She delivers a calm and moving defence of her marriage before walking out of the court. Despite Wolsey's efforts, the proceedings falter. The Pope delays a decision, and Henry grows frustrated. Anne Boleyn's prominence increases. The king's desire to marry her intensifies. Wolsey, having failed to secure a swift divorce, loses favour. His enemies seize the opportunity. Letters and documents are uncovered suggesting Wolsey acted in his own interests. He is stripped of his offices and retires in disgrace. In a long and reflective monologue, Wolsey laments his downfall, accepting his fate with resignation. Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, rises to prominence. He supports the king's desire for reformation and secures an annulment of Henry's marriage. Henry and Anne are secretly wed, and Anne is crowned queen. She soon becomes pregnant. Court rivalries continue. Cranmer himself is nearly accused of heresy, but Henry intervenes, defending him against his critics. The child Anne carries is born, a daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth. The court celebrates, though the birth of a girl is a disappointment to those hoping for a male heir. The play concludes not with Anne's eventual fall, which is omitted, but with the christening of Elizabeth. The ceremony is accompanied by a prophetic speech from Archbishop Cranmer, who declares that Elizabeth will bring peace, wisdom, and prosperity to England. The final scenes return to pageantry and optimism. The rise and fall of powerful figures is framed as part of divine providence. Though the characters' fates are mixed, the play ends on a hopeful note. A new child is born. A future is imagined. The cycles of power continue, not with resolution, but with renewed expectation. Troilus and Cressida is set during the Trojan War, but it does not follow the typical heroic arc. Instead, it presents a world filled with cynicism, betrayal, and decaying ideals. The play opens in the besieged city of Troy. Troilus, a young Trojan prince, is in love with Cressida, the daughter of a Trojan priest who has defected to the Greeks. Troilus confides his feelings to Pandarus, Cressida's uncle, who promises to help bring them together. Meanwhile, the Greek and Trojan camps are locked in a long and seemingly pointless war. The Greeks are demoralized, and their greatest warrior, Achilles, refuses to fight, sulking in his tent with his companion Patroclus. The Greek leaders, Agamemnon, Ulysses, Nestor, and Diomedes, discuss how to restore morale. Ulysses proposes that Ajax, a lesser but boastful warrior, should be elevated to provoke Achilles' jealousy. This manipulation is emblematic of the play's tone: strategy over honor, image over substance. In Troy, Troilus and Cressida finally declare their love. Their union is portrayed with a blend of idealism and fragility. They consummate their relationship with the help of Pandarus, who acts as a crude and self-congratulatory go-between. Their love, while earnest in the moment, occurs in a world that does not reward sincerity. Soon after, Cressida is traded to the Greeks in exchange for a captured Trojan warrior. Troilus is devastated. He insists that she remain faithful despite the separation. Cressida, confused and frightened, is brought to the Greek camp. There she quickly becomes the object of Diomedes' attention. Though she resists at first, she eventually yields to him, either out of pragmatism, fear, or weakness. The shift is quiet, but deeply unsettling. Troilus secretly witnesses Cressida giving a token of love to Diomedes and is heartbroken. His illusions about love and loyalty begin to collapse. He returns to Troy, disillusioned, and seeks vengeance on Diomedes. The war, once a backdrop, now becomes personal. Meanwhile, the Greeks continue to manipulate their ranks. Ajax is used and discarded. Achilles, finally drawn back into combat, is persuaded to fight again, not out of honor, but vanity. In a climactic moment, he ambushes Hector, the noblest of the Trojan warriors, and has him killed with the help of multiple Greek soldiers. The death is not a fair duel, but a brutal ambush, stripping the conflict of any remaining dignity. The play ends abruptly. Troilus mourns Hector's death and calls for further violence. Cressida does not return. The war continues without glory. Pandarus, now a broken figure, delivers the final lines, passing his role as a go-between to the audience, as if spreading disillusionment. There is no resolution. Love is betrayed. Honor is hollow. War is meaningless. The world of Troilus and Cressida is one where ideals collapse, and even the structure of tragedy seems to falter. The curtain closes not with catharsis, but with corrosion. Nothing ends, everything frays. Coriolanus begins in Rome during a time of civil unrest. The common people, or plebeians, are rioting due to a food shortage. They direct their anger toward Caius Marcius, a patrician general known for his contempt of the lower classes. He sees the masses as ungrateful and fickle, unworthy of political influence. Despite his disdain for the people, Marcius is a celebrated soldier, respected for his bravery in defending Rome. Rome is soon threatened by the Volscians, a rival city-state. Marcius leads the Roman forces against the Volscian city of Corioli and achieves a decisive victory, earning him the honorary title Coriolanus. His courage on the battlefield elevates his standing among the patricians, and he is nominated for consul, the highest elected office in the Republic. To be confirmed as consul, Coriolanus must gain the approval of the commoners. He is advised to humble himself, wear modest clothing, and seek their voices with flattery. Though reluctant, he follows the advice and publicly solicits the people's support. However, he does so insincerely and with thinly veiled contempt. Two tribunes of the people, Sicinius and Brutus, recognize his disdain and begin to stir opposition. After being elected, Coriolanus loses patience with the rituals of democracy. He lashes out against the plebeians and the idea of sharing power with them. His speeches reveal his belief that rule should be reserved for the elite. The tribunes seize on this, accusing him of treason and inciting the mob to demand his banishment. The Senate, under pressure, yields. Coriolanus is exiled from Rome. Enraged and humiliated, Coriolanus travels to the land of the Volscians and seeks out his former enemy, Tullus Aufidius. He offers to join the Volscians in attacking Rome. Aufidius, initially suspicious, accepts the proposal, seeing Coriolanus as both an ally and a potential rival. Together, they march toward Rome, and the city panics at the thought of its former hero now leading the enemy. The Roman leaders attempt to negotiate, but Coriolanus refuses to relent. In desperation, a delegation of Roman women, including his mother, Volumnia, his wife Virgilia, and his young son, go to plead with him. Volumnia, who raised him with rigid discipline and a fierce sense of Roman honour, appeals to his loyalty and reputation. Her words succeed where others failed. Coriolanus agrees to make peace. The Volscians see this as a betrayal. Aufidius, feeling undermined and jealous, accuses Coriolanus of treason. In the final scene, Coriolanus is surrounded and killed by conspirators. His death is sudden but unsurprising. The play ends not with triumph or redemption, but with silence and uncertainty. Coriolanus dies neither hero nor villain, but a man undone by his inability to adapt. His virtues, courage, pride, and resolve, become his downfall. The state he served turns against him. The enemy he joined rejects him. No side claims him. He stands alone and then falls. Titus Andronicus opens in Rome, where the general Titus returns from a victorious campaign against the Goths. He brings with him prisoners, including Tamora, queen of the Goths, her sons, and her secret lover, Aaron. As part of a Roman ritual, Titus sacrifices Tamora's eldest son despite her pleas. This act of vengeance sets into motion a brutal cycle of retribution. The political scene in Rome is also in turmoil. The emperor has died, and a new leader must be chosen. Titus is offered the throne, but refuses, instead supporting Saturninus, the late emperor's eldest son. Saturninus rewards Titus by taking his daughter Lavinia as his empress. However, he soon changes his mind and marries Tamora, newly freed, who vows revenge against Titus for her son's death. Tamora, with Aaron's cunning guidance, quickly begins to dismantle Titus's life. Her sons, Demetrius and Chiron, rape Lavinia and cut off her hands and tongue to keep her silent. They leave her in the forest mutilated and unable to identify her attackers. Meanwhile, Titus's sons are framed for the murder of Saturninus's brother and are sentenced to death. Aaron, acting in secret, tricks Titus into cutting off his own hand in a futile attempt to save his sons. The hand is returned to him, along with the severed heads of his sons, as a cruel message. Titus descends into apparent madness, but it becomes clear he is plotting his revenge. Lavinia eventually reveals her attackers by writing their names in the dirt, with a stick held in her mouth. Titus bakes Demetrius and Chiron into a pie and serves it to Tamora during a banquet. He then kills her, reveals the truth, and stabs Lavinia, reasoning that her honour cannot be restored. Saturninus kills Titus in retaliation, and is then killed by Titus's remaining son, Lucius. In the final scene, Lucius is named the new emperor. He sentences Aaron to death and promises Tamora's body will be left unburied as a warning. Aaron, unapologetic to the end, proudly admits his crimes and expresses regret only that he could not commit more. The play ends in silence, drenched in loss. What began as a tale of triumph has descended into horror. Every act of vengeance spawns another. Justice becomes indistinguishable from cruelty. The great city of Rome is stained with blood, its rituals of honour perverted into madness. Titus Andronicus is not a story of redemption or renewal. It is a closed circuit of pain and retribution, where each character is drawn deeper into violence. Even moments of love or loyalty are overwhelmed by the force of revenge. By the final curtain, no victory remains, only the wreckage of pride, power, and broken bodies. The stage is cleared, but nothing is resolved. The wheel has turned once more, grinding all beneath it. Romeo and Juliet begins in Verona, where two noble families, the Montagues and the Capulets, are locked in an ancient feud. Their hostility spills into the streets, where even servants are quick to draw swords. The Prince of Verona issues a stern decree. Any further bloodshed will be punished by death. Amid this backdrop, Romeo, a Montague, pines for a woman named Rosaline, who does not return his affections. His cousin Benvolio encourages him to forget her. They learn of a masked ball hosted by the Capulets and decide to attend in disguise, hoping Romeo will find someone new. At the same time, Juliet, a young Capulet, is told by her parents that she should consider marrying Paris, a noble suitor. She agrees to meet him at the ball. At the Capulet feast, Romeo and Juliet see each other for the first time and fall instantly in love. Neither knows the other's identity. Their attraction is mutual, intense, and immediate. When they discover that they belong to opposing families, they are shaken but not deterred. The feud that surrounds them only deepens their bond. The next day, Romeo visits Friar Lawrence, who agrees to secretly marry the couple. He hopes that their union might reconcile the two families. With the help of Juliet's nurse, who serves as a go-between, the lovers are wed in secret. Tragedy soon intrudes. Tybalt, Juliet's hot-tempered cousin, challenges Romeo to a duel for crashing the Capulet ball. Romeo refuses to fight, as he is now Tybalt's kinsman by marriage. Instead, Romeo's friend, Mercutio, accepts the challenge. Tybalt kills Mercutio, and Romeo, enraged, retaliates and kills Tybalt. For this act, the prince exiles Romeo from Verona. Juliet is devastated by Tybalt's death and Romeo's banishment. Their wedding night becomes their only night together. Before fleeing to Mantua, Romeo visits Juliet, and they part at dawn, uncertain if they will ever meet again. Meanwhile, Juliet's parents, unaware of her secret marriage, arrange for her to wed Paris immediately. Desperate to avoid this second marriage, Juliet seeks help from Friar Lawrence. He gives her a potion that will simulate death. She is to take it the night before the wedding. Once buried in the family tomb, she will awaken and Romeo will retrieve her. The plan is bold but fragile. Tragically, the message sent to Romeo, explaining the plan, never reaches him. Instead, he learns only that Juliet is dead. Distraught, he buys poison and returns to Verona. He enters the tomb, sees Juliet's still form, and drinks the poison. Moments later, Juliet awakens, finds Romeo dead beside her, and takes her own life with his dagger. The families arrive, stunned by the loss. Friar Lawrence explains everything. The deaths of Romeo and Juliet finally pierce the enmity between the Montagues and Capulets. Reconciliation comes, but it is too late. The feud ends, but at a terrible cost. What hatred divided, love could not survive. Peace arrives, but only in the silence that follows the final breath. Timon of Athens opens in the grand halls of a wealthy Athenian nobleman named Timon, known across the city for his lavish generosity. He gives freely to friends, artists, politicians, and strangers alike. He hosts extravagant banquets, funds dowries, pays debts, and showers gifts upon anyone who flatters him. Around him gather a host of seemingly loyal companions, poets, merchants, senators, all praising his virtue while eagerly benefiting from his wealth. Timon believes in the goodness of mankind and expects his kindness to be returned in spirit, if not in coin. His steward, Flavius, quietly warns him that his spending far exceeds his means, but Timon dismisses any concern, trusting that his friends will help him if the need arises. That need soon comes. When debts can no longer be ignored, Timon sends servants to request help from those he once enriched. One by one, they refuse. Some make excuses, others deny they ever received much, and a few simply turn him away. The betrayals are consistent and total. Shocked and embittered, Timon hosts one final feast. At this farewell banquet, he serves his guests nothing but warm water. After toasting their health, he denounces them all in a furious tirade, flinging the water at them and driving them from his home. He gives away what little remains and abandons the city to live in the wilderness, turning his back on all of society. Now living in a cave outside Athens, Timon transforms into a misanthrope. He curses humanity, rails against greed, and compares people to beasts. His speeches grow darker and more poetic, filled with bitterness and contempt. He digs in the earth for roots to eat, and unexpectedly finds a stash of gold. The irony is bitter. In his self-imposed exile and hatred of wealth, he discovers riches. Even in ruin, news of his fortune spreads. Visitors begin to arrive, not to comfort him, but to use him. A band of thieves come seeking money. Timon gives them gold, but only to encourage them to continue robbing the corrupt world. Alcibiades, a general recently banished from Athens for defending a condemned soldier, also visits. Timon gives him money to fund a campaign against the city, welcoming its destruction. Flavius, the only loyal figure from Timon's former life, visits him too. He grieves Timon's downfall and declares that he would serve him still, even in poverty. Timon, briefly moved, acknowledges Flavius's goodness, but remains resolute in his disgust for society. As Alcibiades prepares to march on Athens, the senators come to beg for mercy. They attempt to enlist Timon to mediate, but he refuses. He rejects all pleas, all reconciliation. He has made his peace with the world by cutting himself off from it entirely. The play ends not with resolution, but with Timon's death. He leaves behind a grave with a bitter epitaph, condemning all who pass. Athens may be spared by Alcibiades, but Timon's rejection of mankind is final. What began in opulence ends in solitude. The man who gave everything now gives nothing except his scorn. Julius Caesar opens in Rome, where the populace celebrates Caesar's recent victory over Pompey. While the people cheer, not all are pleased. Two tribunes, Flavius and Marullus, scold the crowds for their fickle loyalty and begin removing decorations honouring Caesar. The atmosphere is charged. Glory and unease walk side by side. Caesar enters amid public fanfare. A soothsayer calls out from the crowd, "Beware the Ides of March." Caesar dismisses the warning. Meanwhile, Cassius, a senator, begins to stir rebellion. He fears Caesar's growing power and believes he aspires to become a king. To stop what he sees as tyranny, Cassius approaches Brutus, a noble Roman and Caesar's close friend. Brutus is torn. He admires Caesar, but fears what unchecked ambition might bring. Cassius manipulates this concern, forging letters from citizens urging Brutus to act. Brutus, believing the assassination would preserve the Republic, joins the conspiracy. The plot begins to take shape. On the morning of March 15th, Caesar ignores warnings from his wife, Calpurnia, and from the soothsayer. He goes to the Senate, where the conspirators gather. They surround him and stab him. Brutus among them. Caesar dies with the words "Et tu, Brute." His death marks the supposed salvation of Rome. But the aftermath is not as the conspirators hoped. Brutus addresses the Roman people, arguing that Caesar's ambition left no choice. The crowd listens respectfully until Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal ally, delivers a funeral oration that turns everything. In measured tones, Antony praises the conspirators, while subtly casting doubts on their motives. He reads Caesar's will, which leaves money and public parks to the citizens. The mood shifts, outrage builds, riots begin, the conspirators flee, chaos spreads. Brutus and Cassius raise armies to defend their cause, while Antony joins forces with Octavius, Caesar's heir. The war becomes inevitable. Brutus and Cassius, once confident, begin to fray. Misunderstandings arise. Portia, Brutus's wife, takes her own life, driven by fear and despair. On the plains of Philippi, the opposing forces meet. Before battle, Caesar's ghost appears to Brutus, a silent reminder of the price paid. The battles are fierce. Cassius, believing his army defeated, orders his own death. Soon after, Brutus, surrounded and weary, takes his own life as well. When Antony finds Brutus's body, he honours him as the noblest Roman of them all. Unlike the others, Brutus acted not out of envy, but from a genuine belief in the good of Rome. Yet the result is the same: death, division, and the collapse of the old order. Julius Caesar does not end with triumph or restoration. It ends with the question of power unanswered, and the Republic gone. What remains are shifting alliances and the slow rise of empire. Assassination did not preserve freedom. It ended one man's life and changed the fate of a nation forever. Macbeth begins in a desolate landscape as thunder rolls. 3 witches gather, speaking in riddles. They plan to meet again after a battle to speak with Macbeth. Their chant, "Fair is foul and foul is fair," sets the tone for a world where moral boundaries are blurred. In Scotland, Macbeth, a valiant general, has just led King Duncan's army to victory against rebel forces. On his return, he and Banquo, his comrade, encounter the witches. They greet Macbeth with 3 titles: Thane of Glamis, Thane of Cawdor, and King hereafter. Banquo is told he will father kings, though he himself will not be one. Shortly after, messengers arrive and confirm Macbeth's new title as Thane of Cawdor. The first prophecy has come true. Tempted by ambition and the supernatural promise, Macbeth begins to wonder if he must act to fulfill the final part, becoming king. When King Duncan announces that his son Malcolm will succeed him, Macbeth sees a new obstacle. He writes to his wife, Lady Macbeth, who immediately plots to kill Duncan when he visits their castle. Lady Macbeth urges her husband to act, questioning his courage and manhood. Macbeth hesitates, troubled by moral fear, but ultimately agrees. That night, he murders Duncan in his sleep. Lady Macbeth smears the blood on the guards to frame them. When Duncan's death is discovered, Macbeth kills the guards in feigned outrage. Duncan's sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, flee for their safety, making them seem guilty. Now king, Macbeth is uneasy. He remembers the prophecy about Banquo's descendants and fears the loss of his throne. He arranges for Banquo and his son, Fleance, to be murdered. Banquo is killed, but Fleance escapes. Macbeth begins to unravel. At a banquet, he sees Banquo's ghost and reacts with horror, alarming his guests. Macbeth visits the witches again. They offer new prophecies. Beware Macduff. No man born of woman shall harm Macbeth, and he will remain invincible until Birnam Wood moves to Dunsinane Hill. Macbeth feels emboldened. These things seem impossible, yet he remains wary and orders the slaughter of Macduff's wife and children. In England, Macduff joins Malcolm to raise an army against Macbeth. News of his family's murder steels Macduff's resolve. Together, they prepare to return to Scotland. Meanwhile, Lady Macbeth, tormented by guilt, begins to descend into madness. She sleepwalks, scrubbing imagined blood from her hands, murmuring, "Out, damned spot!" Her grip on reality fades, and she eventually takes her own life. As Malcolm's forces approach, they cut down branches from Birnam Wood to use as camouflage. making it appear the forest is moving. Macbeth clings to the witch's words, believing he cannot be killed by any man born of woman. In the final battle, Macduff confronts him and reveals that he was born by caesarean section, from his mother's womb untimely ripped. Realizing too late that the prophecy was a trap of truth twisted into false security, Macbeth fights to the end and is slain. Macduff presents his head to Malcolm, who is hailed as the new king. The tyrant has fallen, the natural order is restored, but the cost is high, and the stain of ambition lingers in the silence that follows. Hamlet begins in the cold darkness of Elsinore Castle. A ghost has been seen, wandering the battlements at night. It looks like the recently deceased King of Denmark. The guards bring in Prince Hamlet's friend Horatio to witness it. The ghost appears again, but does not speak. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Hamlet is in mourning. His father, the king, has died suddenly, and his mother, Gertrude, has married his uncle, Claudius, who now sits on the throne. Claudius tries to steady the realm, offering celebration and diplomacy. Hamlet, however, remains withdrawn and bitter. He senses something deeply wrong beneath the surface. When Hamlet finally meets the ghost, the truth is revealed. The spirit is indeed his father, and he claims he was murdered, poisoned in his sleep by Claudius. The ghost demands revenge. Hamlet agrees but is shaken. He begins to act erratically, feigning madness while he wrestles with doubt, morality, and fear. He doesn't act immediately. Instead, he tries to confirm Claudius's guilt. When a troupe of actors arrives, Hamlet stages a play that mirrors the murder described by the ghost. He watches Claudius closely during the performance. When Claudius rises in distress, Hamlet is convinced. Yet he still hesitates. He finds Claudius alone at prayer and almost kills him, but decides not to, fearing that killing him during prayer would send his soul to heaven. Hamlet delays again, unsure whether justice can exist in such a corrupted world. As he wavers, others begin to suffer. Polonius, the king's advisor, spies on Hamlet. Hamlet, thinking he's caught Claudius, stabs him through a curtain. It is a fatal mistake. Polonius's daughter, Ophelia, who once loved Hamlet, is devastated. She unravels into madness and drowns in what may be suicide. Her brother, Laertes, returns in fury and joins Claudius in plotting Hamlet's death. Hamlet is sent to England with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, old friends now turned spies. Claudius gives them secret orders to have Hamlet killed, but Hamlet escapes, sending his would-be executioners to their deaths instead. He returns to Denmark changed, darker, calmer, resigned. Laertes challenges Hamlet to a duel, arranged by Claudius as a trap. The weapons are rigged. Laertes' sword is poisoned, and a poisoned drink is kept for Hamlet as backup. During the match, Gertrude unwittingly drinks the poison meant for her son. Laertes wounds Hamlet, but in the scuffle they swap swords, and Laertes is also wounded. With his dying breath, Laertes reveals the truth. Hamlet, finally spurred to action, kills Claudius. The court is a ruin of death. Claudius, Gertrude, Laertes, and Hamlet himself all fall. As Hamlet dies, he tells Horatio to live on and tell his story. Fortinbras, a Norwegian prince, arrives and takes quiet control of Denmark. He orders Hamlet to be honoured with a soldier's rights. The play ends in silence. Questions of fate, vengeance, and morality remain. Hamlet's tragedy is not just in death, but in delay, the endless search for meaning in a world where meaning keeps slipping away. Othello begins in Venice, where a soldier named Iago is furious. He has been passed over for promotion. Instead of choosing him as lieutenant, Othello, the Moorish general of the Venetian army, has selected the younger and less experienced Cassio. Iago conceals his anger behind a mask of loyalty. Outwardly obedient, he inwardly plots ruin. At the same time, Othello has secretly married Desdemona, a noblewoman of high birth. Her father, Brabantio, is outraged by the union and accuses Othello of using witchcraft. The Duke of Venice, however, hears Othello's defence and finds the marriage honourable. Othello is sent to Cyprus to defend against a Turkish invasion, and Desdemona travels with him. When they arrive, news comes that the Turkish fleet has been destroyed by a storm. There is no battle to be fought. Instead, a quieter war begins, one of deceit and manipulation. Iago sets his plan in motion. He wants revenge not only on Othello, but on all those who have, in his view, slighted him. He begins to poison Othello's mind. He drops hints that Desdemona is unfaithful and suggests that Cassio is her secret lover. At first, Othello resists the idea. He loves and trusts his wife. But Iago persists, using coincidence and suggestion to build suspicion. The key moment comes when Desdemona innocently drops a handkerchief, Othello's first gift to her. Iago plants it in Cassio's lodgings. This handkerchief becomes Othello's proof. He demands to see it, and when he learns it was found in Cassio's possession, his doubt turns to certainty. Consumed by jealousy, he begins to unravel. His language changes. His judgment collapses. He vows to kill both Desdemona and Cassio. Meanwhile, Iago manipulates others as well. He tricks his own wife, Emilia, Desdemona's maid, into stealing the handkerchief without telling her why. He also gets Cassio drunk and orchestrates a brawl that gets Cassio dismissed from his post. Everything is calculated, cold and careful. Desdemona, unaware of the growing danger, continues to plead Cassio's case to Othello, believing she is helping. Her compassion becomes more evidence in Othello's eyes. Emilia begins to sense something is wrong, but it is too late. At night, Othello smothers Desdemona in their bed. Emilia arrives, discovers the murder, and exposes her husband's plot. In a moment of horror and truth, Iago kills her. Guards arrive, and Iago is arrested, though he refuses to explain his motives. Othello, realizing the enormity of what he has done, delivers a final speech and takes his own life. He dies beside Desdemona, the woman he loved and destroyed. The play ends not with comfort but with silence. Cassio is left to take command. Iago remains alive, unrepentant and unreadable. The world has not been righted, only shattered. Othello is not a tale of betrayal alone, but of trust turned against itself. The tragedy lies not just in murder, but in the slow corrosion of belief. What was noble is ruined not by war, but by whisper. King Lear opens with a royal ceremony and a fatal misjudgment. Lear, the aging king of Britain, decides to divide his kingdom among his 3 daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia, based on how much they profess to love him. Goneril and Regan flatter him with extravagant speeches. Cordelia, who truly loves her father, refuses to embellish. She says she loves him according to her bond, no more nor less. Lear, enraged by what he sees as ingratitude, disowns her and splits the kingdom between the other 2. The King of France, moved by Cordelia's honesty, marries her, despite her lack of dowry. Lear, meanwhile, intends to retain the title of king and live alternately with Goneril and Regan. But once they hold power, they begin to strip him of his dignity. First, they reduce his retinue, then they criticize his behaviour. Finally, they turn him out altogether. Lear, betrayed and broken, wanders into a storm. Parallel to this story runs another, equally cruel. Gloucester, a nobleman loyal to Lear, is deceived by his illegitimate son, Edmund. Edmund forges a letter to make it seem that Gloucester's legitimate son, Edgar, is plotting against him. Gloucester believes the lie and drives Edgar into hiding. Disguised as poor Tom, Edgar becomes a mad beggar, wandering the same wild terrain as Lear. As Lear rages against the storm, he descends into madness. He shouts at the wind, strips off his clothes, and begins to see the world more clearly in his broken state. He is joined by his fool, who offers bitter truth in riddles, and by poor Tom, whom Lear sees as the image of unaccommodated man. Together they form a strange procession of suffering and clarity. Gloucester, too, is brought low. When he aids Lear, he is betrayed by Edmund and captured. Regan's husband, the brutal Duke of Cornwall, gouges out Gloucester's eyes. In a moment of cruel irony, Gloucester only understands the truth when he can no longer see. Meanwhile, Cordelia returns from France with an army, hoping to rescue her father and restore order. She finds Lear, now lucid but frail, and they reconcile. Their reunion is tender and short-lived. The English forces, led by Edmund, defeat Cordelia's army. She is captured and sentenced to death. Lear hopes for a life with her in prison, but Edmund's orders are carried out. Cordelia is hanged. Edmund is wounded in battle by Edgar, who reveals his true identity. Before dying, Edmund tries to reverse the execution, but it is too late. Lear enters, carrying Cordelia's body in his arms. His mind teeters between lucidity and madness. He dies grieving, crying out that she still lives even as he crumbles beside her. The few survivors, Edgar, Albany and Kent, stand amid the wreckage. Power is restored, but the world is hollowed. The play ends not with restoration, but with exhaustion. All is lost that might have been saved. Kingship, loyalty, and love have been tested, and undone. The storm has passed, the silence remains. Antony and Cleopatra begins at the height of the Roman Empire. Mark Antony, one of the triumvirs ruling Rome after Julius Caesar's death, is living in Egypt, entranced by Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. Their relationship is passionate and extravagant, marked by lavish feasts, dramatic quarrels, and declarations of undying love. But back in Rome, political tensions are rising, and Antony's prolonged absence is viewed as a dereliction of duty. News arrives that his co-ruler, Pompey, is preparing for war. Antony returns to Rome, where he agrees to a political marriage with Octavia, the sister of his fellow triumvir Octavius Caesar. The union is meant to restore balance between the leaders, but Cleopatra is furious. Though Antony assures her that the marriage means nothing, the damage is done. Antony's efforts to re-establish Roman order are short-lived. Conflict with Caesar escalates, distrust brews. When Antony returns to Cleopatra, Caesar sees it as both a personal betrayal and a political threat. War is declared. The climactic battle takes place at sea, near Actium. Cleopatra's fleet unexpectedly retreats. Antony follows her, abandoning the fight. His reputation is ruined. His troops begin to defect. In Egypt, the lovers find themselves increasingly isolated. Antony's sense of honour erodes. He accuses Cleopatra of betrayal, only to reconcile with her again. Their bond, volatile but deep, persists even as the world closes in. As Caesar's forces approach, Antony suffers defeat after defeat. Misinformation hastens the end. Cleopatra, fearing capture, sends word that she has taken her own life. Devastated, Antony attempts suicide. His wound is not immediately fatal, and he is carried to Cleopatra's monument, where he dies in her arms. Cleopatra, now alone, considers her options. Caesar offers her safety if she surrenders. She fears being paraded through Rome as a trophy. Determined to die on her own terms, she arranges for an asp, a poisonous snake, to be smuggled into her chamber. She dresses in her finest robes, lies upon her throne, and lets the asp bite her. Her handmaidens die beside her. When Caesar arrives, it is too late. He mourns their deaths, praising their grandeur even as he claims victory. He orders that they be buried together, leaving their story to become legend. Antony and Cleopatra is not just a tale of war and politics, but of identity torn between worlds. Rome and Egypt, duty and desire, logic and excess. In the end, love becomes defiance, and death becomes a kind of triumph. The empire survives, the rulers fall, yet their passion leaves a mark beyond strategy or rule. In death they become eternal, flawed, glorious, and indivisible. Cymbeline begins in Britain during the reign of the titular king, who is dealing with both personal and political unrest. His daughter Imogen has secretly married Posthumus Leonatus, a man of low birth but noble character. King Cymbeline is furious and banishes Posthumus, hoping Imogen will instead marry his new queen's arrogant son, Cloten. Posthumus flees to Italy, where he becomes entangled in a wager. A cunning Italian named Iachimo bets that he can seduce Imogen and prove her unfaithful. Confident in her virtue, Posthumus agrees. Iachimo travels to Britain, fails to seduce Imogen, but sneaks into her room while she sleeps and steals personal tokens, including a bracelet. He also takes note of intimate details about her chamber to make his case more convincing. Back in Italy, Iachimo falsely reports success. Posthumus, devastated, sends orders to his servant Pisanio to kill Imogen. Pisanio cannot follow through. Instead, he reveals the plot and advises Imogen to flee. Disguised as a boy named Fidel, she escapes into the Welsh wilderness. Meanwhile, Cloten, enraged by Imogen's disappearance, dresses in Posthumus's clothes and follows her, hoping to murder Posthumus and defile Imogen. In the forest, he encounters a cave where an old man, Bellarius, lives with two young men, Guiderius and Arviragus. Unknown to all, these youths are actually Cymbeline's long-lost sons, stolen in infancy by Bellarius as revenge for a wrongful exile. Cloten's arrogance leads to his death at the hands of Guiderius, who beheads him. Imogen, sickened and mistaken for dead, is taken in by Bellarius and the brothers. She awakens to find Cloten's headless body dressed as Posthumus and believes her husband has died. The story shifts back to the looming threat of war. Cymbeline, refusing to pay tribute to Rome, faces an invasion. Posthumus, now in disguise as a common soldier, fights for Britain to seek redemption. Bellarius and his adoptive sons also join the battle and play a crucial role in securing victory. After the war, all the threads begin to tie together. Iachimo confesses his deception. Imogen is revealed to be alive. The identities of the long-lost princes are discovered. Cymbeline pardons Bellarius and reunites with his children. Posthumus and Imogen are reconciled, their bond tested but unbroken. Even the political conflict resolves. Cymbeline decides to resume paying tribute to Rome, signalling peace. What began in anger and confusion ends in clarity and reconciliation. Cymbeline blends tragedy, comedy, and fairy tale. Its world is full of disguises, coincidences, and improbable reunions. Deceit gives way to truth. Lost children return. Lovers are restored. Kings forgive. The final mood is one of calm after turmoil. No grand moral is declared. Instead, forgiveness and restoration speak softly. What was broken is mended, not through justice alone, but through the quiet mercy of recognition and return. And so we come to the end. 36 plays, each shaped by shifting power, quiet tragedy, unexpected joy, and the familiar rhythms of human nature. From the rise and fall of kings to the quiet conversations of lovers, these stories trace the edges of history and the depths of the heart. Some begin with thunder and end in silence. Others move gently from chaos to calm, but each, in its own way, leaves something behind. A thought, a question, a quiet echo. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. We hope to see you again soon.